Today's daf, Be'ezras Hashem, is Masechta Zevachim Daf Nun Daled, and we will begin from Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis, about 3-4 lines from the bottom. So basically, we've been discussing here yesterday, that really the whole Mizbeach, the entire Mizbeach, was in the domain of Binyamin, Shevet Binyamin, and part of the Mizbeach was encroached on the east side, on the south side, by land belonging to Shevet Yehuda, and this bothered Binyamin. But that's nothing you can do. It doesn't belong to him anymore. So they didn't produce a yesod, a foundation around the area belonging to Yehuda. As you can see in the picture, this is an aerial view. They just had a yesod, which is a foundation a little bit around the north side and the west side. By the way, the west side is the part that, you leave the sanctuary, you come out here. But if you did Matan Damim Bifnim, and this side already, and this side did not have any yesod. So the Gemara is now going to discuss over here. We're going to Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Gemara is going to discuss that topic. Amar Rab Levi Bar Chama, Amar Rab Chama Bar Chanina. 4 lines from the bottom in Gimel Amud Beis. Ritzuya ha'isa yaitz mechelkai sheYehuda v'nichnasa b'chelkai shel Binyamin. There was a piece of land extending from the part belonging from Shevet Yehuda, and it went into the part of the land belonging to Shevet Binyamin. And therefore Binyamin could not build his Mizbeach on the land belonging to Shevet Yehuda. And we know that from other places that the service has to be done in the land belonging to Shevet Binyamin. So they couldn't build the Mizbeach anywhere on the land belonging to Yehuda. He was so upset that extra piece of land doesn't belong to him. And he was so bothered, he really wanted to take it back or buy it off Ben Yehuda. Shnema, because the pasuk says, he's crouching, and he's worried about it the entire day. This is one of the brachas that was said regarding Shevet Binyamin. He's like something who's obsessed about it the whole day. Because he had this obsession that he wanted the entire service to be in his land, and it should be done in a nice way. Therefore, Binyamin HaTzadik was merited. He is considered to be the hotel owner, so to speak, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because the entire Beis Hamikdash belongs in his place. And not only that, but even the places where the Shekhinah was in Noiv and Shiloh, all of those places, the Kodesh HaKadoshim had to be built on land belonging to Binyamin. Shenema, because the pasuk says, again, regarding Shevet Binyamin, by his shoulders God will rest. So to speak, that all these holy places had to be belonging to Shevet Binyamin. God, that land where God is going to build the Kodesh Kodashim, and had to be belonging to Shevet Binyamin. So when they built the Beis Hamikdash, everything was great, except that the land wasn't so even. And when they built the Mizbeach, they had to leave off part of the Mizbeach, Yisoidos, as you can see, because that wasn't his land, it wasn't his property. It belonged to Shevet Yehuda on the south side, on the east side. So therefore, by the way, the ramp of the Mizbeach went on the south side. So we're going to see it over here. Let's take maybe I have a better picture here. Yeah. So that's what you see. Now you can see it clearly in this picture over here, and probably a better picture, that on the south side already there was no ramp. And on the east side, there was no ramp. On the west side, there was a ramp. The north side, there was a ramp. and there was just a little bit of a ramp. I'm sorry, a little bit of, I'm using the word ramp, but I mean a foundation, a little bit of foundation on the north, on the there was a foundation on the north and west, but a little bit of foundation east and south. Okay, so now the Gemara says a question. Basically, I'll ask you a question. Oilus oif ketzad oisinasas. How did they do the oilus oif? This is how they did the carbon oil of a bird. They would do the malika, and then they would take its head off, and then squeeze the blood, sprinkle the blood, and then push it against the wall of the mizbeach. That was the oilus ha'oif. And they did it on the side of the mizbeach, apparently that there was no yisoid on the mizbeach. The amrit loy hayisoid, if they did it on the side of the wall that did not have a foundation, ba'avira ba'almahuda ka'avid, they did it in the air. And in other words, where did this blood, if the kohen is standing on the soivev, let's say, and he's standing on, let's go back a little bit. So if he's standing on the wall that, let's say he's standing on the eastern wall, and he's doing it, well, this eastern wall belongs to, up until the wall, probably belongs to Shevet, when the blood, like, I guess, goes off the wall, it probably, if you could do it over here, like say on this wall, the blood will land on the spot belonging to Shevet Yehuda. That's the question. So when the blood comes down, if the whole area belongs to Shevet Yehuda off the wall, so then how the service is now being done in Shevet Yehuda's property, not on Shevet Binyamin's property? That's what the Gemara's question is. If you're going to say loy hoya loy yisoid, there was no foundation there belonging to Shevet Binyamin, ba'avira ba'alma huda ka'avid, are you doing the blood falling onto the air? It's falling onto the air space, and it's probably is falling into Shevet Yehuda's property, because the airspace belongs to Shevet Yehuda. So some of the blood, I guess, gets into Shevet Yehuda's airspace. So Omar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak taught us, Eima kachesni avira de Binyamin, karka de Yehuda. That the truth is that the land, the ground itself, belongs to Shevet Yehuda. The airspace above that ground belongs to Shevet Binyamin. So even if you want to say that the airspace on the southern wall, the eastern wall, the airspace belonged to Shevet Binyamin, it's the ground that was belonging to Shevet Yehuda. So therefore you could stand on the side, even if the blood ended up in the airspace of Yehuda, that airspace belongs to Shevet Binyamin. So my loy havi yisod, we're just discussing over here, and I've learned one direction. I've learned that the yisoid is as I drew it over here, as it's drawn over here, that there was no yisoid producing. It was just a little bit, but not, there was no actual yisoid, there was no actual foundation there. We're going to learn that it's actually a machlokes. One holds that there was no yisoid. Levi's going to hold they actually did build the yisoid over here. They did build the yisoid, but it had no kedusha to it. That's what Levi is going to hold. So my loy havi yisoid. What does it mean that they didn't have a yisoid, a foundation? Rav says b'binyan. There was no yisoid built there. There was no foundation there. But Levi says they built the foundation there b'damim, but you couldn't put any blood there because it belonged to Shevet Yehuda. So there was a structure there, but it belonged to another Shevet. Rav explains the pasuk. Rav explains the pasuk. Bachsante yispnei madbecha. In his area, the mizbeach should be built. So nothing should be built in Shevet Yehuda's area. Levi had the interpretation of the pasuk describing where the mizbeach was built. Is bachsante yispnei magdasha. In his place, the mizbeach is holy. Yes, it could have been built a little bit on Yehuda's property, but it didn't have the holiness of a place where you can put blood there. It's not a place where you could put the blood there. So that is the machlokes between Rav and Levi. So says the Gemara. Tashma, come in here. Hayesoid. This is going to be a question to Levi. Tashma, come in here. Hayesoid hayamahalach apnei tzafim b'apnei kol marav. Like the picture I'm showing you, that the Brisa says the Yisoid went on the north side and on the west side, but it was nothing built on the east side and the south side. So this is a kasha against Levi. Levi said they actually built it, it just didn't have a kedusha to it. And the Eichel B'daram Ama Achas Mizrach Ama Achas, and the Brisa says that it in the east and the west, east and the south, it just ate up a little amma. There was an amma, as you see in the red here, whatever. There was an amma here, an amma here. It came up a little bit, but here that's an amma. I'm sorry, that's an amma. Right over here, it came up a little bit over here on the A side. So this is a question against Levi. Levi said they actually built. So the Gemara says, "My oichel nami b'dama." What oichel means, it means that you could only sprinkle it on that amma. But yes, there was a structure along the whole south and east side. So it just you couldn't sprinkle any blood opposite the rest of the Yesod. Tashma, I'm going to prove you that it was like Levi. The Mizbeach was 32 by 32. Oh, so this is a very clear indication, like Levi, that if you're having the Mizbeach 32 by 32, then it must have looked like a box. So it was 32 by 32, right? 32 by 32. So there was nothing missing on the side, right? So there was nothing missing on the side. And says the Gemara, it means that you don't look it up from here and here, but from from the north and the west, that's when it had 32 by 32. That's what you have to say. Tashma, come and bring a proof. Ninsa pereach ama al yisoid v'ama al hayisoid. The Brisa says that the ramp that came up, right? The ramp that came up was, the Gemara says that the reason the Gemara thought that the ramp was 32 amas long, and the width of the Mizbeach was 32 amas. So they're both the same size. So that was how the ramp was able to go up. So the Gemara always thought that what the Brisa over here means to say that the ramp the Mizbeach had a foundation opposite the ramp over here. So now you have the ramp 32 amas, including the Yesod. Tashma. Nimtza Perech Amal Yesod Ba'amal Yesod. So we see that the ramp was over a foundation and an amma over the Soiviv. So really it was only 30 amas long, but it sloped upwards over a Yesod and over the Soiviv. But what you do see is that on the south side of the Mizbeach, there was a Yesod, amma al Yesod. And says the Gemara, no, there was no Yesod on the south side. There was a Soiviv, as you can see over here, as I have it red marked over here, but there was no Yesod. There was no foundation over there, but it could have had a foundation over there, but there was no foundation over there. Tashma, come in here. Tutani Levi taught, Ketzid Bainin and Mizbeach. How did they build the Mizbeach? So let's see the picture. They built the Mizbeach like this. They built a frame and filled it up with building material. And the bottom frame was 32 by 32, the Bryce is going to say. The middle frame was 30 by 30, and the top frame, which represented the top of the Mizbeach, was 28 by 28. So you see the kasha. Tashma, come in here. Honey Levi taught, Kate to the Mizbeach. How did they build the Mizbeach? They would bring a frame that was 32 amas by 32 amas and height an amma. They filled it up with chaluki avan mufalamis, certain type of stones. Ben gedolos, ben katana, smooth stones. Baby sid, they bring sid, plaster, vicuña, and molten lead, v'zephus and tar, mamach, and they melt it down, v'shayfich. That was the Yesod, which was 32 by 32 amas. So again, it seems that there was a Yesod going all the way around, like Levi just said. But continues the Brisa, maybe Malbim, or maybe next frame was high 5 amas by 30 by 30. And they filled it up with stones and did the same process. Maybe Malbim, that was in place of the Maracha. Maybe Malbim, then they bring a frame that was just an Ama to make the horns, to make the corners of the Mizbeah. Maybe this was somehow the building material, how they built this Mizbeach in 3 parts. The Yesod was 5 tvachim, the next part was Lamed tvachim, the top part I think was Lamed ches tvachim. Bottom line is that it seems to say, if you're telling me that this was 32 by 32, that means the Brisa seems to say that there was a Yesod over here. The bottom frame was 32. How are you going to say? But you can't. That after go to Amud Beis, after they built the frame, the gazes lay. They cut it down. That means really it was 32 by 32. But then after the Mizbeach was built, they cut off a piece for the Yesod that should not be there because it's on Yehuda's property. But the Gemara says, it has, once you put a stone there, you can't cut it down. Torah tells you that a Mizbeach has to be complete stones. You can't chisel with it. Answers the Gemara, the Machas Midi Betusa V'Shakalei. You put, so Rav asks, this means you place something underneath the place in a place where there is no base. And after you pour the mixture, and after it dried, he removes it, leaving this place empty. If you're not going to say that, how you can explain what Rav Kahana said? That Rav Kahana said the stone of the interior corners were hollow. There were gaps between the stones, as it's written, because obvious Mizbeach, and they should be filled like the basins, like the corners of the Mizbeach. So so if the Torah tells you it has to be complete unhewn stones. So how did they cut it down? They had some method to pretend it's there, and then when everything is done, pull away something. So hachinami. So also over here, that here too, they place something under the frame, and later they remove it. So So again, the Gemara just try to get out of the language of the Brisa. The language of the Brisa seems to say that they had a frame 32 by 32. So what the Gemara is saying is it wasn't really 32 by 32. It was 32 by 32 on 2 sides of it, but 2 sides of it, it was a makeshift fake frame. And then when they actually filled up the building material of the frame, they just removed the other part to it. Why did they have it that way in the beginning? I guess because maybe it held it together until everything cemented in place. Bottom line is, what we have here, and we'll finish this discussion, is a machlokes between Levi and Rav. Rav has the opinion, like we always have the picture over here, that there is no frame, there is no Yesod on the south side and on the east side of the Mizbeach. And Levi said there was a Yesod, this is Levi's opinion, there was a Yesod, but you couldn't sprinkle any blood over here. You could only sprinkle the blood on the first Amma, but not where it's marked in red. But there was a Yesod. Physically, there was a Yesod. Now the Gemara continues. Tarish Rava, and this will conclude our daf. Tarish Rava. Rava made a pasuk. Darshan the pasuk. What does the pasuk say? Remember, Hashem never told us where the base of Mikdash should be built. So David and Shmuel went. The Yeshuv b'Novis b'Rama. They stayed in Novoyas and Ramah. It seems like there's 2 different places. What is Novoyas Ramah? If it's New York, it's not New Jersey. It's New Jersey, not New York. Nevoyas and Ramah are two different places. Ella Shayashim of Ramah. They had a meeting. David and Shmuel had a meeting in Ramah, where Shmuel lived. They were dealing with the beauty of the world. In other words, they had a discussion, David and Shmuel, where to build the base of Mikdash. Amru, it says like this: the Torah tells you, "V'kamto v'lisa elamokim," that the place that the Torah hints is where the base of Mikdash is on a mountain somewhere, on a high elevation. Malamed teaches you, "Shebase of Mikdash gavoya mikol Eretz Yisrael, v'Eretz Yisrael gavoya mikol haratzos." Okay, so that teaches you that the base of Mikdash is the most elevated place in entire Israel, and Israel is most elevated than the entire earth, spiritually. But they still couldn't figure out on whose property should they build the base of Mikdash, which of the Shematim. So I say Yisayfa Yeshua B'Kulei. That was I say Yeshua. So they started to sit down, Shmuel and David, to learn Sefer Yeshua. And Bekule, by all the other Shvatim, when it describes the topography of their land, it says V'Yarad, V'Ala, they had elevations, they had depreciation. In other words, it went down. B'Taragvul, B'Shavit Yomim, and by when it came to the psukim that describes Shavit Binyamin's part of Eretz Yisrael, V'Alaksiv, it goes up, it elevates, V'Yarad Laiksiv, it doesn't decline. So they must be that Binyamin is the only Shevet that has the highest elevation in Eretz Yisrael. Shmamina hachul b'kayim. So they knew that the base of Mikdash was supposed to be built in Shevet Binyamin. Savel mivini bein oitim the midlight. They thought to build it on the highest point in Shevet Binyamin's property was in a place called Ein Etam, but because that was the highest elevation in Binyamin. Amri, they said, Nitnane Beit Kalil. Let's find a little bit lower elevation. Because the pasuk says, "Ubein Sefer Shachem." God rests not on the head of Binyamin, but on the shoulders of Binyamin, not the highest point, but sort of a little bit lower than that. So there's like a certain humility. So not the highest point in Shevet Binyamin's property in Israel. So they didn't build it on Ein Eitan; they built it on Har Hamaria. The Iba is saying, if you want, I can tell you, Gemiri, they had a Kabbalah, the Sanhedrin Bechelka Yehuda. They had a Kabbalah always that the Sanhedrin was in the property belonging to Yehuda, and the Beis Hamikdash was in the property belonging to Binyamin. If they lift it up so high, then there's a gap between where the Shechina is and where the Sanhedrin is, so to speak. So they wanted to make it as close as possible that they're more or less near on the same level, the Shechina with the Sanhedrin. Mutiv the Nisr Beipurta the Ksiv Ubein Sefer Shachem. Therefore, they lowered it. They found it not the highest point in Shevet Binyamin's property, but somewhere that was a little bit lower down. So they discovered that the Beis Hamikdash should be built on Har Bayis where it was, and Shevet Yehuda's was a little bit lower than that on where their Sanhedrin was. So we see that David HaMelech discovered what Hashem decided that where exactly the base of Mikdash should be built. While David Zen is kind of David Hadoimi was jealous over David HaMelech. The pasuk says, "Kikinas beischa achal lasni." That David Dayeg was jealous over that David HaMelech was so concerned about where to build the base of Mikdash. The pasuk says, "Zachar Hashem leDavid eskol unoisai ashnishbal Hashem." All the suffering that David went through, he said to himself, "I'm never going to sleep until I just find the solution to this puzzle of where Hashem wanted the base of Mikdash to be built." The pasuk says that I heard about it in Ephros and I found it in a forest. Ephros is a Yeshua, the Ka'asim Ephraim. I found it because I studied Sefer Yeshua, and that gave me the hint of where the base of Mikdash should be built and which of the Shvatim's property. So by learning Sefer Yeshua, he discovered that it was in Shevet Binyamin's property, Mitzunua B'Steyari, and I found it by the forest Zeh Binyamin. Why is Binyamin called a forest? Because the Ksiv Binyamin's Eiv Yitra. Ba'amin is like a wolf that devours, that captures prey. So a wolf is found around the forest. So therefore, that's how David Melech hinted that he learned at Sefer Ephraim, he learned Sefer Yeshua and discovered that the Beis Hamikdash should be built on Binyamin's property. But as we learned today, not the entire Mizbeach was on Binyamin's property. Most of it was on Binyamin's property, but of course the foundation was on the east side, and the south side of the Mizbeach was not on Binyamin's property, and because of that, therefore, they did not put a foundation there. Okay, we'll leave it by the next Mishnah.